very much. And good morning, everybody. You should know that I've been told that you guys are going to be the most fun group that we talk to all week. So I have high expectations. When we do this presentation, it's very interactive. So I will shout out questions to you, and they're not hypothetical. I really do want you to give me some answers so we can kind of brainstorm throughout the group as we go through this. And it's going to get very interactive in the last half of what we do. I'm going to talk to you for a little while first. So I am a registered nurse. I'm board certified in occupational health nursing. What that means is that anything that falls under the very broad umbrella of employee health and safety on any side of that is kind of what I specialize in. And so I have a couple of things in common with you all. One is that as employers here, people who are representing your employer, trying to manage injuries and keep your employee population safe, and all the struggles that you go through to do that. So preventing injuries, managing injuries, getting them as well as they can, getting them back to work, and everything in between is what I spent the first 20 plus years of my occupational health nursing career doing. I worked for private employers, just like you do, to try to represent their interests and kind of straddle that fence to make sure we take really good care of our employees, prevent injuries, manage injuries, treat them well, but also manage the finances. We saw the millions up here, right, that it's costing everybody. So you have a really important job. I feel your pain because I did that for 20 plus years for various employers, and I'll talk to you a little bit about some of that and my experience. So I get what your frustrations are. The other thing I have in common with you is that, I grew up in the automotive industry. Basically, I'm kind of old, so many of you in this room won't even remember this, but back in the day there was a thing called a full-service gas station. So it wasn't like you pulled up to the pump and get out and pumped your gas and could run in and get a snack and a cold drink while you're at it. You pulled up to the pump and someone came out and pumped your gas for you, washed your windshield, checked your oil, aired up your tires. Some of you remember, right? So that was my family business that I grew up in. My mom and dad ran the place. My brother and I got off the bus after school right there rather than at home. And he'd go in the back and help work on cars with my dad. And I would go in the front and help my mom pump gas and check oil and wash windshields and all that. Then in my adult life, for several years, I owned an automotive repair business. So I have a pretty good insight, particularly in the service area, as to what your people are doing and the difficulties that they're facing in trying to do their job. So that's why I'm here to talk to you today about some ways that maybe, some creative ways that you might be able to manage this. So what I'm going to do first is talk to you at a very, very high level about the pathophysiology of stretching. We've all heard that stretching is good for us, right? That's not new. But what I'm going to do is try to explain to you in some really basic terms what happens in your body when you stretch that makes it good for you, and all the additional benefits of that you may not have thought of, which can really help when you're trying to convince your employee population to commit to this. Then I'm going to tell you, speaking of committing to it, I'm going to give you the what's in it for you, each individual in the room. If you stretch, here's what you stand to gain. And then I'm going to also tell you just a little bit about my personal story, which is hopefully going to validate for you why I'm so passionate about this topic, because I really am passionate about it, and you'll figure that out as we go. So we're gonna do that first, then I'll give you a break, and then we're gonna kind of do the second half of this as we go. So What happens when you stretch? What goes on in your body? What do you guys think? When you stretch, you've seen people stretch. What are they doing it for?
Relax yourself.
Warm up, right? It's a warm up, right? So there are a lot of things that happen in your body when you stretch, but I'm going to focus on one primary component that is the most beneficial, in my opinion. And that is, when you stretch your muscles get tight, right? Muscles will shrink up, dry up, and get tight. And then you'll get muscle spasms. And if you get really bad muscle spasms, then that can lead to nerve impingements, and it's just an ugly, vicious cycle. So when you stretch a muscle, you're actually pulling it taut against its own desire to kind of pull against you because it doesn't want to be stretched. But when you do that and you hold it there for a few seconds, what's going to happen is, you're going to feel it. It opens up, I call it a floodgate. It's a floodgate of circulation, blood flow that comes in. And when that blood flow comes in, the real obvious thing that it does is it comes in and it lubricates the muscle. So we're talking about all the soft tissues, so muscles, tendons, and ligaments, okay? But most people just think of it in terms of the muscle. So when that blood flow comes in, it's warm, thus the term warming up. You're bringing in warm blood flow. And it lubricates. So obviously if it's tight and dry and kind of shrunken up, and you bring in the warm blood and lubricate it, it's going to loosen up a little bit and stretch out. But the other benefit of that blood flow, when that blood comes in, is that it brings with it oxygen and nutrients that are going to help to nourish and heal those tissues, which is really the vital part of this. The warm-up lubrication part is kind of the basic, but healing the tissues is what's really important. So I use this analogy all the time. I didn't make it up just for you, but it is specific to your industry, so you can relate, I'm sure. Would you ever dream of going out and buying a new car and never changing the oil? I sure wouldn't. My dad taught me better than that, right? We know that if we make an investment in our vehicle, if it's gonna run well, and we want it to run a good long time, and we want it to, give optimal performance, we've got to do preventive maintenance. So when you give your car an oil change, it's that fresh flow of lubrication in your engine, right? Engine's happy. Why wouldn't we do the same thing for our bodies? Think of stretching as providing a fresh oil change to your body. But you got to do it more frequently than every so many thousand miles. With stretching, you've got to do it daily. And you will benefit from it if you only do it once a week. You'll benefit from it if you only do it once a day. You'll reap the best benefit from it if you do it every day, multiple times throughout the day. And I'll explain to you how that works and when is the best time to do it for the most benefit. But it really doesn't matter when, how, where, who you do it with. It just matters that you do it, and do it periodically throughout your day. And I'll show you how that can really help to improve your whole outlook, not just how you feel, but your whole outlook on your day, your attitude, your mood. It's a pretty cool thing. So when we stretch, we improve the blood flow. And can you even see that back there? Are you able to see it? It's kind of a small screen. It seems really far away today. So yes, you improve your blood flow, but when you improve your blood flow, you also improve your range of motion. So if those muscles are dry and tight and in spasm, they shorten up. So your range of motion is not going to be as good. So your range of motion is going to be, how high can I lift my shoulder before I say, ow, and I can't really go any higher, right? How far can I bend at the waist? How well do your joints move through the range of motion? Is that better? You see it a little better? We don't want to go too dark, so I don't want to put him to sleep.
Is this okay, or you want it down? Down or up, yes?
What works for you guys back here?
Better to see it if you take it down.
Take it down a little bit.
All right.
Seeing slides?
Huh?
Are you having a hard time seeing slides?
Well, I just wondered if they could see it. I was
I think
asking
it's just
them.
so
'Cause-
far away, the small screen here.
Yeah, so I'll talk you through it, don't worry about it. And we have copies, Marlon has copies of my presentation. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later, but I want you to have my presentation so you can use it. So, yeah, it improves your range of motion. Has anybody ever heard that when you get into your car in the morning, wherever your mirrors are set, that when you come out after work or toward the end of your day and you get in your car, you're supposed to readjust your mirrors? Do you know why that is? Because the tension that we all have throughout our day, good day, bad day, doesn't matter. We've got tension in our life that we can't make go away. If I could make stress go away in everybody's life, I'd be really famous. None of us can do that, right? We can't make the stress go away. This is about managing the stress in the best way that we can. So the National Safety Council did this huge study several years back that I found really interesting. They had a campaign going to encourage people to readjust their mirrors when they get in the car at the end of their day. Because our natural tendency, our body's tendency, after we've dealt with whatever the day throws at us, is tension, and it causes us to slouch. Not real noticeable where we're going to even see it, but pay attention to that. Try that. Make sure your mirrors are set where they need to be in the morning, and when you come out at the end of the day, see if they still look perfectly adjusted. Because they had some really good scientific evidence that you will be slouched. And so, of course, they wanted to make sure everybody was safe, so they were encouraging everybody to recheck their mirrors. That's all about posture, right? And if you stretch, you can improve that posture despite all the stress of your day and whatever tension there was. You can actually, you may not have to adjust your mirror if you just stretch a little bit. So we also reduce muscle tension, that's what we're talking about, and preventing injury, right? That's important to you. So what's a little bit different about this presentation that I'm doing for all of you this week is that normally when I do this presentation, I'm presenting it to the entire employee group who is going to go out and do it, right? So in this case, we couldn't get all of your entire employee groups together just by the nature of the work and the various locations across the state. So instead, we brought someone who is a leader from each dealer in here to hear what I have to say. And so the little different twist on what we're doing this time is I'm going to present it to you. I want you to understand it for yourself. But I'm also going to present you some ideas and tips on how to bring this back to your employee workforce and get them to engage in it as well, right? So it's kind of a train the trainer approach that I'm taking on this. So I will talk to you, the individual, and then I will talk to you as the employer representative, kind of on two different dynamics here. But, you know, whether it's individual or employer perspective that we're looking at, we all want to prevent injury, right? Nobody wants to get hurt. Nobody wants their employees to get hurt. And so I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that if your employees stretch, they'll never get hurt. No, that's not true. But what I can tell you is that if your employees stretch regularly, if they do get hurt, it's very likely that it won't be as severe as it would have if they didn't stretch. And the time that it takes for them to recuperate is probably going to be less. And even maybe when they get to their maximum medical improvement, you hear that term in the work comp world, MMI. Sometimes MMI is not as good as they were before they got hurt, right? So, a lot of people, when you have a back strain is a catch-all term in the medical world that is used to describe and diagnose every kind of back pain that there is, right? You may or may not have a ruptured disc or a herniated disc. It may just be musculoskeletal. You sprained or strained something. So they're going to call it a back strain no matter what really caused it and what parts of the body are involved, you know, because the back is complex. When you get a back strain, some people don't agree with this. This is my opinion. It's my professional opinion. When you've got a back injury, you always have a weak spot in that back, especially if it's a low back injury. So it may be that you recuperate very well, you get back to your normal routine, and maybe it doesn't bother you every day, but then once the rain's coming, there's a storm coming, or it's really humid out, then all of a sudden it's going to scream at you. Or maybe it doesn't bother you until you overdo it one day, and when you overdo it, it starts screaming at you. So stretching is a really good way to counteract those effects when people say, I got a bad back. They say that because they've had a back injury and they have the nagging effects that kind of go on chronically. Not everybody, but many, if not most people, will have some sort of chronic effect from a back strain, simple back strain. So a really good thing to do is to teach them to do stretches to counteract that effect. And that works great. It's actually very, very helpful. So all of these things are good things that would happen. Here are some other things that you might not expect can come out of stretching. If you can't see that, it says you sleep better. Who would have thought you can stretch to sleep better? So if you're a person who has trouble sleeping, maybe you have trouble falling asleep, or you fall asleep as soon as you hit the pillow, but then you wake up throughout the night and can't go back to sleep, or you toss and turn all night. Maybe you're somebody who you're asleep within seconds of your head hitting the pillow, and you don't wake up until the alarm rings in the morning. But when you wake up, you still feel tired. You don't feel rested, right? We all know that there's sleep and there's restful sleep. Restful sleep is what really benefits our body. And the ill effects of not sleeping well are enormous. The list is far too large to discuss. But I can tell you that if you do some gentle stretching before you go to bed at night, and when we go through these stretches, I'll point out which ones are really good for that. We don't want to do aerobic exercise and get our heart rates up. But some gentle stretching will help to counteract all of that stress that whatever the day threw at you has turned into muscle tension. It will help to relax it so you'll actually sleep better. So, I talked about healing tissues by opening that floodgate of circulation, bringing in that warm blood flow with the oxygen and the nutrients. So, if you think, and I'm going to relate this to the aging workforce. So you heard a lot about the aging workforce in Justin's presentation. And, let's face it, we're all dealing with that. If you're 20-something today, then you may not understand it as well as if you're 50-something today. Because let's face it, in our 20s, we all kind of think we're invincible, right? We all were guilty of that. When you're young and you feel good, you aren't going to take injury prevention quite as seriously. But then once you're 40-something and 50-something, and as time goes on, your body starts feeling the effects of the wear and tear that we put on it throughout our entire lives, right? So that's why the 20-somethings might be getting hurt more often, because they don't take safety and prevention quite as seriously, generally speaking, as the older people, because we know, I'm going to be 58 in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to tell you what, when I was 28, I didn't worry about these things. I'll do this, it'll be fine. If I get hurt, I'll get well. But at 58, it's like, I don't really want to do that because that's going to hurt really bad and it's going to take me a long time to feel better. And you just get to the point where it's like, I don't want to feel bad, so I might not even do something. So the difference is like, I'm going to give you a couple of little comparisons here. So if you took a perfectly normal, apparently very healthy, uninjured 20-year-old and a perfectly normal, uninjured, healthy 50-year-old and said, we're going to take an MRI of your shoulder just for fun. No injuries, no pain, never had pain in my shoulder. The 50-year-old's MRI is going to look scary. The 20-year-old's MRI is probably going to look somewhat normal. So that, no injuries, no strain, no pain, right? Just a normal MRI on a healthy person at 50 years old is going to show a ton of wear and tear. It's not going to say everything looks shiny and new. It's going to show wear and tear. That's why whenever I have an employee who's getting an MRI, I never let them see the report and read it until I explain it to them. Because if they see that report, it's going to scare them to death. They're going to think they're a mess, where they're just a typical 50-year-old. We put wear and tear in our bodies. So I use the analogy of, like, you ever need a rubber band and you're digging in your junk drawer and you finally find that one rubber band, thank goodness I found it, and you stretch it out to use it, what happens? It snaps, right? So when you look at that rubber band, it's got all these little cracks and frays along the edges, cracks. When you stretched it, it didn't feel as pliable as it did when it was a new rubber band, right? That is the perfect analogy for our muscles and tendons and ligaments. It's perfect. That's exactly what happens to them when we don't nourish them with extra blood flow every single day. So that's why, and I will give you a demonstration later, sometimes people will blow out their back from picking up a pen off the floor. Most of the time when somebody has a really bad back injury, you associate it with overlifting, right? We heard that in the presentation. They lifted something that was too heavy, they should have got help, they should have used a hydraulic lift, or maybe they didn't use good body mechanics. But sometimes it's something that is as simple as a piece of paper or a pen. Nothing with any weight whatsoever, because our muscles and soft tissues are just like that rubber band. And if we haven't nourished them, it doesn't have to be that you're trying to lift 100 pounds. It could be just bending over to pick something up. And I'll show you how that works a little bit later. So, does it surprise you that I say we can have more energy if we stretch, increase our circulation? We know that if you exercise, increase the circulation, you're going to have a little bit more energy. Well, what about improving your mood? Would you ever associate that with just doing a few stretches every day? You actually can improve your mood because you're producing some endorphins. Anybody hear of endorphins? Right? That's the feel-good hormone. We all have them. Our bodies produce them, but we produce more as our circulation increases. So people that are like runners or exercise junkies that work out all the time, if a runner breaks their leg and can't run, they have a tendency to get very depressed because they're used to having so many endorphins flowing in their system. That's why runners tend to always be, not always, but most runners tend to be happy because they feel good. They've got a lot of endorphins. So then there's the, oops, wait a minute, I went the wrong way. Then there's the aches and pains, right? We talked about that. Nobody wants to have aches and pains. Anybody tend to wake up most days with some sort of ache or pain? You know, not always, but some days. So I know, and I have a good reason why, and I'll explain it to you in a little bit, but when I wake up with any kind of ache or pain, first thing I do when I get out of bed is I stretch it out, and those aches will go away. I get more flexible, and before you know it, I'm moving around doing my normal thing and I don't have any more pain. That's a pretty easy fix. No pills, no medication, no surgery. I just spend a couple of minutes stretching and I can make that chronic ache or pain go away, or at least minimize it to the point that it doesn't really bother me. So when I used to work for an electric utility company that when I went to work for them, I managed their medical department, spent about 10 years doing that. And when I went in there, I had a lot of experience doing occupational health for general industry, but I knew nothing about the electric utility industry. So when I went to work there, I knew that if I'm going to take care of all of their health and safety needs, help them put an injury prevention program together, understand if they get hurt, what kind of work they have to go back to, I needed to learn about the jobs they were doing. So I went into their morning meeting at the service center where all of the people who worked outdoors, so the overhead linemen, the underground construction, the outdoor crews would get together every morning and they would have a little kickoff meeting and they'd talk about the work that's coming up for the day, and there was always some sort of a safety message included in that. So I sat in on their meetings every morning because I really wanted to learn about what they do. And I listened a lot, I asked a lot of questions, and it became very evident to me that there was this one group of people, the overhead linemen, that had really hard jobs. You know, I had seen bucket trucks all over in the neighborhood all my life, and there might be linemen up there working on the line out of a bucket. What I never stopped to think about is, if they can't get a bucket truck into the area, how did they get up the pole? Anybody know? How did they get up top to work on it? They climb it. They actually climb the pole, which blew my mind because I just had never seen that. So then I watched them. They strap blades around their lower legs and the blades point inward, so they have to be really careful not to cut themselves when they walk with those things on, and it used to happen all the time. But they kick the blade into the pole and then they kick in and then they pull it out, which is really hard because they want to be in deep so they don't fall, right? And they work their way up the pole. Not to mention, then they have to climb over, you know, the cable lines and the phone lines and everything else that's in their way. And then they get up there and they're working on 7,000 plus volts of live electricity. It's like, wow, these guys have a stressful job. You know, I knew it was stressful because of the danger of working around live currents like that. I never stopped to think about the physicality of getting up the pole. And then once they get up there, they just kind of hang there. Their feet are kicked in, they've got kind of a belt around their waist and they hang there and they're working overhead, and you know, body mechanics, really not possible to do good body mechanics. So when I realized that, one day I decided to ask one of these guys who I noticed was very vocal. Little did I know he was the president of one of the union locals. That's why he was so vocal. So I knew he was kind of in a leadership role. So I went up to him and I said, man, this seems like really hard work. And you know, I'm watching your body language every morning and some of you guys look like you're miserable, like you're hurting. He goes, oh, we hurt every day. You know, the older ones are worse because we've been doing it for a long time. So the natural aging process that I talked about, the aches and pains that we'll wake up with every day as the decades go on, is even worse for them because since they were in their early 20s, they've been doing this really hard physical work. And it was hard for me to comprehend how they could do it without having some sort of prevention in place. So I said, hey, do you guys ever, like, I've never seen you do any stretches or warm-ups. What do you guys do to protect your bodies? And he laughed. He said, nothing. We all hurt. I said, well, you know, that kind of stinks. So I said, would you guys consider stretching if I got a program put together? He said, oh, no, and he laughed at me. He said, I can tell you're new here, Karen. You don't understand. They'd never let us do that while we're on the clock. We got to be out under the blue sky working. That's how it works, you know, work, work, work. And I said, so what if I could get it approved? If I committed to getting it put together, getting it approved for you to do it, do you think you guys would do it? And then he laughed some more and he said, no, 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 you don't understand. We come in here, we have this kickoff meeting, but then what you don't see is we go out then and we order our materials for the day. We might hang around at the dock for an hour waiting on materials, load up our materials, then we drive maybe another hour to get to the job site. When we get to the job site, we might wait on some construction supervisor for another half an hour. And he's like, by the time excuses. By the time we actually go to do the work, any effects of stretching that morning would be long gone. And he was like, nah, he had every excuse in the book. So I quickly recognized they don't know me well enough yet. I need to let them get to know me, build some rapport. They need to trust me. I need to prove that I care about their well-being and I'm, you know, because I was a manager in a union company. And if any of you have ever had some experience with that, it's union management, and sometimes they do nothing but clash. Not always, but sometimes. So it's like, nah, you're a manager. You can't possibly have my best interest in mind. So I thought, all right, now's not the time. I've got to prove myself to them. So I tucked that idea in my back pocket, and I went on about my business. Fast forward about 5 years, and I had a supervisor call me and say, Karen, I've only got 32 people in my group, and we are beating them up. Like, can you help us? We've had 4 shoulder surgeries in the last year. I got people that are hurting. They've all got aches and pains, and I don't know what to do to help them. So he sounded pretty desperate. So I went in and I met with that group of people, and they were a very, very diverse group. There was 20-something to 70-something. I knew that because one guy that we did surgery on was 72 years old. We actually operated on both his shoulders over the course of a couple of years. And there were guys, there were girls, there was tall, short, skinny, not so skinny. In my mind, I was seeing the perfect scientific pilot group for my experiment, right? I had a really good, diverse group. And what became evident was they all were really desperate, even the 20-somethings. They were frustrated, they didn't feel good, they couldn't do their job safely, they couldn't use good body mechanics. Their job, they were the metering group, so their job was to install, maintain, repair, replace the electric meters on buildings. So just like on our houses, we have an electric meter or on big buildings of all kinds. They all have some sort of electric meter. Think about the electric meter at your house. What's usually right in front of it? Air conditioning units. For some reason, they put the meter right here and the air conditioning unit right in front of it. So how can you use good body mechanics when you've got this big unit right in front of you, right? You really can't. So when I was talking, or somebody doesn't have an air conditioner there, but they think the meter's ugly and they don't want it to show on their house. So they plant these big, beautiful bushes and shrubbery, or they put a fence. The point being, there's all kinds of obstacles that they have to work around to get their job done. So they were pretty miserable. We talked through it. We were able to change a procedure to improve it a little bit for them. We identified a very inexpensive ergonomic tool that was going to help take some of the strain off their shoulders when they pulled that meter. And so I knew that was going to help a little bit. It wasn't going to fix the problem. So I pulled that idea out of my back pocket again. And I said, what if I get approval, I set it up for you, I will get everything ready for you. The one thing I can't do for you is stretch. I'll stretch with you, but I can't stretch for you. So if you're not going to do it, don't let me waste my time. What do you all think? And I had 32 people in the room that they were all saying, we'll try anything. So I said, okay, I made the commitment and said, I'm going to go to the executive leadership of the company. I'm going to get approval to do this, put it together, and I'll be back to roll it out for you. So I told them about all of these things that I'm telling you. You can have less aches and pains, sleep better, be in a better mood, have more energy. They like that. Then I said, what if you could have better quality time in your time off, right? So think about it. If you work full time, you spend more hours per week at work than you do at home or awake. So a large part of our at-home time when we're not working is sleeping, right? So we have a very small quantity of time that we're not at work. So we want to make the best quality out of that time. What if you could do that just by stretching a little bit? And they're like, what are you talking about? So I said, okay, picture this. Think of your worst day at work ever. So for everybody in the room, I want you to picture really, really bad day at work. It's going to be a little different for all of you. But think about what you felt like that day. Worst day at work ever. Maybe you had plans that evening after work. Maybe it was on Friday, and you had Friday night plans. You were going to go out and do something, or you're going to do something with your family, whatever it is that you enjoy doing in your personal time. If you had the worst day ever at work, do you think it's likely that when it was time to leave work, you came out of there with a little spring in your step saying, oh, I can't wait, I'm going to go do this, and I've got this on the agenda, and yay, going to go do something fun? Or do you think it's probably more realistic that you were like, oh, your body language was like, I hurt, I'm miserable, I got tension in my shoulders, I got a headache, I might have a stomach ache? Because when you have a lot of stress, human nature, every human being, when we have stress, which we can't avoid, we put it somewhere in our bodies. It manifests itself in some sort of physical symptoms. So if you've had that really bad day, it's probably more realistic that you're going to either postpone your plans, or maybe you're going to go and do whatever you're going to do, but you're not going to enjoy it as much because you don't feel good. Maybe you're going to call it an early night because you don't feel good. So whatever it was you were really looking forward to doing, one lousy day at work just blew that for you, right? We all know, we've all been there. We're all guilty of letting that happen to us because we can't make the stress go away, and we don't have really good techniques to manage the stress. But I promise you, if you stretch throughout the day, every day, I'm not talking about spending an hour stretching. I'm talking about throughout your day a sum total of no more than 10 minutes, if that. 10 minutes could make it so that your time that you have in your personal life can be used doing more quality things, better quality of time off, right? And then you can be happier, you can be more creative. Okay, so think about that really worst day ever at work. When you came home, you probably dropped into the recliner. You may or may not have eaten a nice healthy meal. You might not eat at all because you don't feel good, right? If you've got family at home with you, you don't really want to tell them about your day and interact with them because your day kind of sucked, right? So you don't want to go talk about it more. So you're probably doing the, leave me alone, I just need to chill. I need to just let the day fade away. So you don't get anything done, and then you crawl into bed that night still feeling wound up like in knots. And then you may or may not sleep well because you're wound up so badly. You wake up in the morning, are you going to feel good? Probably not. So you see the snowball effect that is happening? We all do it. We've all felt it. And it ebbs and flows. But then what's going to happen if you don't do something to break that cycle of tension, wound up, didn't release it, went to bed, more tension. The snowball effect is gonna lead you to being diagnosed down the road with high blood pressure or an ulcer or chronic headaches or chronic pain of some sort, or even mental health issues, right? Because stress causes symptoms, physical symptoms within our body. So if you can do a little bit of this to counteract that, manage that stress, can't make the stress go away, but we can try to manage it in the simplest way, then maybe that's a little more appealing, right? So you can be happier because you've got more endorphins. You'll be more creative because your mind is clearer, right? You've reduced some of that tension. Anybody in here got a bucket list? Anybody got, oh yeah, that's on my bucket list. You know, for me, it's Fiji. I want to stay in one of the over-the-water glass-bottom bungalows in Fiji. Anybody got a bucket list? Do we dare to have a bucket list? I think everybody has one, even if they don't talk about it or think of it. A dream. It's a dream. Okay, so I've got a bucket list. And I'm going to tell you about something that because of stretching, I was able to tick off one of my biggest bucket list items. Not Fiji, that's still there. Still waiting on that. But what tends to happen is that when we're young, all of those hopes and dreams, what's in that bucket is really full. Because the world is our oyster. We want to do all these things. And as we get older, we may tick off some of those items. But as we get older and there are still some big items in that bucket, we tend to dump them out of the bucket. We tend to say, oh yeah, I really wanted to climb Machu Picchu. When I was 25, that was my plan. When we got out of college, me and all my old college roommates were going to go to Peru and we were going to climb that mountain. Right? But now you're 50 and you may not feel so great. You may not feel like that's the right thing to do. Because as we get older, we start to accept that there are certain things we can't do anymore. Or we could do, but we're going to hurt so badly it's no longer worth it. So we kind of dump some of those larger, more, more ambitious physical dreams out of that bucket list. And that's natural, right? So I'm going to encourage you all to keep everything you have in your bucket list and keep adding it in there. Fill it up, because if you just stretch, obviously you got to have good health. You have to have a lot of things. But in normal situations, barring some terrible accident or terrible illness, then even whether you're 20-something or a 50-something, you should still be able to do this. And it doesn't sound true, but it really is, and I'm living proof. So I put aches and pains on here twice. It's on 2 slides because that's really important, right? If nothing else, forget the bucket list. We just don't want to have aches and pains every day. So those overhead linemen that do this work from 22 years old to who knows how long, you know what? Doing that hard work, by the time they're 25 or 26 and have done it for a few years, they're already living with chronic aches and pains every single day. So think about the people in your workforce. People that are work at service, they got to work under a hood of a car. Can they get under the hood of a car using good body mechanics? We know we're supposed to bend at the knees, right? Not at the waist. If they bend at the knees like they're supposed to, are they going to be able to get in there and do what they got to do? No. Body mechanics go out the window. There are some tips and tricks we can give them to make it a little safer, but they've got to bend at the waist. So teaching them the little things that they can do to counteract the effects of all of the stuff that they have to do in their jobs is what's going to help them. So your job is going to be to bring it back to them and convince them. You're going to have to take all of this information and convince them that it's worth it. And the 20-somethings are harder to convince than the 50-somethings. It's just natural. But When you've got a 20-something who's already feeling the effects of, wrenching down on something all day, or like I heard Marlon say the other day, it can be as simple as, if somebody's rotating tires, the car's up on the lift, bring it down to the appropriate safe level to remove the tires. But they don't bother because it takes a couple of minutes more, right? So it's go, 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 hurry, hurry, hurry. So if they're not going to use the good body mechanics, at least they can try to stretch to get the benefit of the blood flow and the healing and the nutrients, kind of healing up their frayed rubber bands, if you will, right? So all of these things sound great, right? Yeah, it's wellness speak. We hear that all the time, but human beings have a tendency not to do things just because they're told to do them, right? If I tell you, you have to stretch because it's good for you. You have to eat right because it's good for you. You have to exercise for at least 5 hours a week because it's good for you. Are you gonna all of a sudden change your life and do all those things? And you may be doing some of those things now. I don't mean to imply that you're not. But what I'm saying is, when someone tells you you have to do something, our human nature is to go, hold on a minute. We don't like to be told what to do. So the key in this is convincing them that they want to do it, because you tell them what's in it for them and why they will appreciate it. So when I talk to groups of employees, I tell them, be selfish. I don't want you to think about your employer or anybody else but yourself and your loved ones right now. Think about what this can do to benefit you, not anybody else. And then you tend to get their attention. So when I pick somebody in the room and I say, what's your favorite thing to do in your personal time?
Go to the gym.
Go to the gym. Okay, so you're one that is already doing some of that. But that's what you like to do. If you were injured and couldn't go to the gym, would it bum you out?
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd feel the effects of that, right? Not having all those endorphins and all that circulation.
Yeah.
So relate it to people. What's your favorite thing to do off work?
Not a thing.
Not a thing. Just chill, lay on a hammock in Fiji, right? Yeah. So whatever it is that you want to do. Inevitably, I get somebody that will say, well, I coach my son's baseball team, or my daughter's softball team, or I love to, coach my kids' wrestling team. Or maybe it's the grandkids. I just want to run around and play with my grandkids. So when you're talking to your employee group, hone in on that. And then when you're talking about all of the things, all of these benefits, instead of talking about it hypothetically, you can say things like, you're going to be able to get to the gym anytime you want to, and you're going to feel really good. And you're going to get to relax anytime you want to, and you're going to feel really good relaxing. You're going to lay in that hammock and not be wound like a top in a big ball of tension. When you're in the gym, you're less likely to pull or strain a muscle because your muscles are going to be healthier. And one of the big risks with people who go to the gym a lot is they want to do more and more and more, and sometimes more is not better. Sometimes more will hurt them, right? So when you go to the gym, you're less likely to get hurt. How about you? What's your favorite thing to do? Read? Perfect. Do you want to read when you're wound like a top in a ball of stress? No. You just want to scream when you feel like that. So you can relax and you can fall into a great book and enjoy it. So relating it to what people really, really like to do, not work. Now, it's real easy as an employer to think, well, I want you to do this program because we're spending millions of dollars on work-related injuries, and if you can't be at work, you're no good to me, because if that lift's not up, then I'm not making any money. You know that as the employer representative here, that that's part of your motivation, but you're never going to say that to your people, right? you're riding that fence. You got to keep your people well, and then you also need to manage the business and try to manage the millions of dollars that are being spent on this. So it's going to be all in the approach. So as the employer representative, when I tell you that doing this is going to help to reduce sick time, improve mental clarity, improve focus, reduce errors, and increase productivity, now that's where an employer says, oh, I like that. Because you do, with all that extra blood flow, you're more focused, you're more clear. And when you're more focused, more clear, you make less errors. When you've got more energy, you're going to be more productive. You're not going to be dragging all the time. So these are all the things that the employer loves to hear, right? This is going to help the bottom line, less errors, less sick time. Those things are all good for the employer. So do you think when I went to the employer at that group of metering employees that I talked to them about this, I went to the employer, the executive leadership at this big utility company, and I said, okay, so here's the problem. 4 surgeries, we've spent all this money. People are miserable. They're crying out for help. And they've agreed that they'll do this if I put it together. So will you give me approval to put this together and roll it out? And let me use them as my pilot group and see how it works. And they were like, well, they're not going to do it. I was like, no, I already talked to them. They committed. You believe them? I'm like, yes, I do. And they said, no, the only way it's going to work is if we make it mandatory. So we got to make it mandatory, force them to do it. And I'm like, that's not going to work. They said, now we got to force them to do it or you're going to be wasting your time. And I finally said, nope, if you make it mandatory, I'm out. I don't want to do it. Because that is a perfect recipe for failure. It's not going to work. And really what the discussion kind of led into with them was about, well, we're going to have to make it mandatory. So then it became more about what kind of disciplinary action are we going to impose if they don't do it, and how are we going to be able to uphold that? And I'm looking at this group of really highly paid executives, and you don't get it. You don't get it. So ultimately, when I showed them the money again that we had spent, just like you just saw, the millions of dollars, and I told them what I wanted to do, because I wasn't going to take no for an answer, they finally said yes, I think just to shut me up and get me to leave. So they said, yes, you can do it. And I said, put it on me. I will commit. I will be responsible for getting their engagement and getting them to buy in and do this. If I can't convince them to do it, I'll accept it as my failure. But let me try it. So they let me go out and try it. So I went and got a physical therapist friend of mine. We put together this program of head-to-toe stretches. I wanted to make sure that we were capturing all the major muscle groups that are going to be the most pertinent to try to prevent the injuries we were having. Shoulders and knees were really bad in that group. So we put this together. I went out and we rolled this program out, kind of similar to what I'm going to do for you here today. And before we did anything, we took range of motion measurements on everybody. And even those that, so when I initially went in to talk to them and asked them if they would do it, I had 24 people that said yes. So 8 people didn't raise their hand. They were kind of like, on the fence. So I thought that was good enough to go forward. So I went forward with it. When I went out there that first day to take range of motion measurements on them, all 32 of them agreed, what's it going to hurt? It's worth a try, you know. And I kind of told them, you know, the whole company's ability to do this program is on the line here. You're my pilot group. I need you to prove the executives wrong. That fired them up. You proved me right and them wrong, and you're going to benefit from it. Well, now they were really fired up, and they wanted to do it. So we did it for 90 days, and the range of motion measurements were all the major joints in the body, We, wanted to see how high you can move your shoulders, lift your shoulders, all the joints. So within the next 90 days as they were doing it, I started getting phone calls from other groups across the company. And they said, hey, we heard that, the meter guys are getting to stretch and they really like it. What's up with that? How come we can't do that? I was like, well, maybe you can. This is a pilot group, we'll see. I had a bunch of people saying, hey, I see them outside doing, they'd go out in the parking lot on nice days and do it together. They're cutting up and having a lot of fun, and why don't we get to do that? So it was already intriguing interest throughout the company, even at other facilities, because the people felt good doing it and they were talking about it, and it becomes contagious. And then everybody wants a piece of that. So I went back after 90 days and I took follow-up range of motion measurements. I kind of had a number in my mind as to what I thought would be successful. What do you think would have been a successful improvement in range of motion? What percentage of people? Out of those 32 people, what percentage of them needed to improve for me to consider this a success? What would you think? About half? What do you think? That half would be good. I set my expectations low. I had decided I'll target about 35% improvement. I wanted 100% participation, but if I could get about 35% improvement, I felt like that was going to be enough to convince the powers that be that this really works. So I go back in there and we do the measurements. We had 100% improvement. Every single person, every joint, the range of motion improved. The 20-somethings that were really fit, runners, go to the gym all the time, the 70-something who had slowed down quite a bit, they all felt better. So that shouldn't have surprised me because I knew it was possible. I was so gratified with that, but do you know what was more gratifying than anything? It was the comments, the feedback that I was getting. I didn't even solicit it. I wasn't asking them. This group of people who I came in the room, a little over 3 months ago, and their body language was like, oh, I hurt, I'm miserable. This group of people was sitting up straight, they were laughing, they were smiling, they were saying, I've never felt better. One guy said, Karen, my wife says I'm not such a grump anymore. One young guy said, I went home and told my wife how much better this is making me feel. I did some before bed and when I got out of bed in the morning, and now we do it together at home as well. One guy had moved his mother-in-law in recently, who had a lot of aches and pains. She started doing it with him. It's good for everybody. The dog can do it. The kids can do it. The grandparents can do it. With one disclaimer, of course, if somebody's being treated for an orthopedic injury of some sort, you want them to talk to their doctor, especially if they've had surgery, to make sure the time is right for them to do this. But it is good for everybody. It helps everybody. It's great for Parkinson's patients. It's great for MS patients. It's great for everybody. So what do you think happened when I went back to the executive leadership and I put that document down and said 100% improvement? They were shocked. And I took a list, I made a list of all the comments that everybody had told me about that day, all the feedback, and I printed it and gave them each a copy. And I said, what else have you done at this company throughout the years that has gotten 100% physical improvement and 100% positive feedback like this? They kind of had nothing to say. They got really quiet. Then I said, so, do I have permission to take this across the whole company now? And of course I did. So, that's a big example of how this started for me, getting to do these programs on site. But I've brought it to very small companies, very large companies, companies that have multiple locations, and they're all able to implement it in some way with their particular workforce. And what's really key is that you personalize it for them, like I told you, right? So these stretches that I'm going to show you, they are adaptable to any environment. They don't require a yoga mat or a gym or special room of any sort. You don't have to wear a leotard and a headband unless you just want to. You know, whatever you're wearing, wherever you are, you can adapt these stretches to your environment. And so I'm going to give you a break here for a little bit, and then when we come back, we're going to go through this. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. Then we're going to jump in and we're going to get stretched out, and I think you're going to enjoy it. All right, so when's a good time to stretch? Well, any time is good. But if you're going to pick a time, if you're going to do it as a group, the best way to do it is start off the day with that group stretching. So if that's the morning, if you have an evening shift, maybe it's later in the day. Beginning of your shift is important. So we talked about blood flow being the most important critical component of stretching, and that's where we get so many of the benefits from. So if you think about your blood flow, you all just sat down. Is your blood flowing? Yeah? You were sitting down for a while before you get up for the break. Your blood was probably flowing a little less then, right? So what I call that, when we're sitting down doing nothing, I call that our status quo low. Our status quo low blood flow, circulation, is what we're going to have when we're not really doing anything particularly active. That's just sustaining life for us, right? So the goal should always be to pick your circulation up to something other than your status quo for whatever you're doing, right? So if you have a desk job, if you sit at a desk all day, your status quo for the day is going to be lower than the person who is up and moving around and doing physical activity. Does that mean that the person who's up doing physical activity doesn't need to stretch? No. It means that you're at just as much risk if you sit all day or stand all day in one place or do heavy physical activity. So everybody's target to improve circulation is going to be something above whatever is your status quo. So if I'm the one that's walking around constantly on the move, doing heavy physical labor, I may have more blood flow going on than the person who's sitting at a desk all day. I've got to ramp my blood flow up above what my status quo is. So it's different for everybody. That's the point, okay? So ideally, if you stretch at least in the morning or at the beginning of your workday, and then periodically throughout your workday, that's going to help you. What I recommend, if you're going to do it at all, and if you want to do it in groups, because let me tell you, there's somebody in every group that I talk to that wants to do it, and they're excited about it, and they get back to work and nobody's doing it, and they're too timid to be the one to say, I want to do it. So it takes some leadership to demonstrate it. Lead by example. Show them that you'll do it too. Do it with them. You can't, it's not going to work if you come in and say, hey, I learned about this program, I think it sounds great, here's all the benefits in it for you, go ahead and do it. You're authorized to do this while you're on the clock at work. You know, obviously it's not going to take too much time, work it into your day. But then you don't go do it too. If you don't lead by example, they're not as likely to engage in it. Okay, so the way to get that engagement started is usually by starting it as a group and then encouraging them to do it periodically throughout the day on their own. And they don't have to like define a time like, okay, I'm going to do it at 10:30 in the morning. Instead, it can be, I'm going to do it when I know that I have to walk from here down the hall to that doorway multiple times throughout my day, for whatever it is I'm doing in my work. then you can do it, especially the upper body stretches, you can do them as you're walking across the floor, right? It's as simple as that. You don't need to identify a time and place and set aside time for it, except if you're doing it in a group. So if you're going to do it in a group, first thing in the morning, after lunch. When we eat lunch, about an hour later, what happens? We eat and our metabolism spikes, and about an hour later, it crashes, right? So some people crash hard, depending on what you ate for lunch, how you're feeling that day. And what if you have a meeting with your boss an hour after lunch, and you're having trouble keeping your eyes open? Maybe your head's starting to nod off because you're just not engaged in what's going on in front of you. That's embarrassing, right? That can get you in trouble at work. But nobody likes to fight. I call them the afternoon doldrums. Nobody likes to have to fight that. Maybe it's not that you're having a meeting where you can't keep your eyes open. Maybe it's just getting through the rest of your day because now your metabolism crashed, you're tired, you're moving slower, you're less productive, you're not as focused because you just crashed, right? We've all been there. So after lunch is a really important time to do some stretches. So if you're thinking you want to kind of encourage this and roll this out as a group thing, then think about the beginning of the shift, after lunch, and then preferably at least a little bit before they go home. And when they start to feel the good effects of it, that's when they're going to start doing it on their own periodically throughout the day. So that technician who's under the hood for hours working on a difficult job, every time they come up, they're probably going to start to feel it in their back. Their back's going to get stiff. And if you've already armed them with the education and the tools they need to know to relieve that back stress when their back gets tight, they're going to just do it naturally. So it's a gradual process that will kind of take shape. You kind of lay down the framework and then it'll take shape on its own. So, and then before bed, I'm going to show you some that are really good to do before bed. And when I go through these stretches, I'm going to show you the ones that are more appropriate to do at work. I would never ask anybody to lie down on the floor at work. I mean, some may want to, but certainly not right now. There's a pandemic going on. We're not going to lie on the floor of this conference room. But the ones where you lie on the floor are the ones that are really good to do before you go to bed at night. Okay? So we're going to get into the stretches in just a few minutes. Before we do that, I'm going to ask you to indulge me for just a couple of minutes so I can tell you why I'm such a crazy zealot over stretching. Okay, I really do believe in this. I really do practice this myself every single day of my life, multiple times throughout the day. And there are some days where maybe I overdid it. Last weekend was a perfect example. I spent 2 days shoveling landscaping rock, and I felt it. That evening, I felt it the next day. I stretched before I did it. I stretched multiple times in between so I could feel myself tightening up. When I know I'm overstressing a certain body part, I'm going to give it extra stretching attention, okay? Because you'll hurt less after the fact. And then the next day, when I went to get out of bed, it was, ooh, I'm going to stretch before I do anything. So you have to listen to your body. All right, my story. I don't think you can see that very well. That's picture me, obviously, and from ear to ear, top of my head, about a 3-inch strip of my head is shaved. And there's 2 great big giant horseshoe-shaped scars on my head with holes in the middle. And those are only 2 of the scars that you can see of the 7 on my skull, my scalp. My hair covers them up now. But that was 4 years ago. In August, I had brain surgery. And it's what led to that brain surgery that I want to tell you about. So 14 years ago, Labor Day 2006, my husband and I had decided, after doing a lot of work in the yard that day, we were going to take off on our Harley and go for a nice cruise out to Lexington, Missouri. We lived in the Kansas City area, so it's a really nice ride out there. We'd done it many times. And we were going to go to a restaurant out there that we really liked. And just a nice cruise, have dinner, cruise back. it was September, so I knew that on the ride back the sun wasn't going to be out. Once the sun came down, it was going to be a little cool. So I wanted to have my helmet that has a face shield and it has a zip-on cuff. So, and I brought my jacket, so it kind of keeps the wind from blowing down in there, keeps you warmer. But on the way out there, it was sunny and beautiful. So I decided to put that helmet in the saddlebag, and I put on my skull cap helmet. Anybody know what a skull cap is? It's that flimsy little half helmet that at the time, Missouri law was still out of helmet law, and it would pass to be in compliance with the law, but it was not DOT approved, certainly not safe. And you know why I put that one on instead of the big heavy one? Because it was nice out, it was sunny out, and if I put the big heavy one on, it was going to make me sweat and it was going to mess my hair up. What a stupid reason, right? Really stupid reason, I admit that. But I learned a really hard lesson. I never, ever, ever in my life rode without a helmet, and almost all the time rode with my DOT approved helmet, but I had recently gotten this skull cap and figured out that when it's really hot outside and you sweat under the helmet, this one messes up your hair a little less than the big one. How stupid and vain was that, right? Now my hair doesn't grow right because I have so many scars all over my head, so that taught me I'm no longer vain about my hair. I kind of could care less. So here's what happened. We got on the motorcycle, we went out for a ride. We were cruising along at 70, 75 miles an hour. There wasn't much traffic at all. No cars ahead of us that we could see. There was one car a little ways behind us. We come over this hill and there's a car stopped in the middle of the road, no brake lights, no turn signal, just stopped. We had no idea why. No time to react. We hit the car, I flew over the bike, over the car, and through the air for about 20 yards, that's what the guy behind us told me, and then hit the ground and tumbled violently for about another 25 or 30 yards before I came to a very violent and sudden stop. Fortunately, I didn't tumble into oncoming traffic, or I probably wouldn't be here, but I was hurt very, very badly. So when I got to the ER, you know, the trauma room, there are periods of it that I remember, and a lot of it, I was in and out of consciousness. But one thing that I remember is when they pulled me out of the CAT scanner, I heard the tech say to the other tech, "Let's get her in quick, she's got major bleeds." Now remember, I'm a nurse. I used to work in that very same hospital where I was. I worked in the ICU where I ended up being a patient for quite some time. So when I had moments of lucidity and I heard that, I immediately knew that's why I have this incredible massive pain in my head. I've got major hemorrhages going on my brain. So when the doctor came in to talk to me, he told me all about that, and I said, "Okay, are you going to drill?" Because I knew, the nurse in me knew you drill burr holes in the skull to relieve the pressure on the brain so your brain doesn't explode inside your skull with that kind of thing. So the nurse in me was thinking, okay, we're going to drill, right? And he looked at me and he says, "Karen, no, it's far too widespread. We can't drill." And I was like, "So what are you going to do?" So "We're going to pray." He said, I don't think we can save you, Karen. So we're going to let your family and friends that are in the waiting room, we're going to let everybody come in, we're going to break all the rules, and we're going to let them spend some time with you because you're going to die. I don't think we can save you. So, surprise, I lived, obviously. I'm not a ghost, I promise. So here's how this story relates to stretching. So I woke up several days later in the ICU, that very same ICU where I used to work, which was really weird. And I remember very, very, very little about the time, the weeks that I spent in ICU. One thing I remember, I woke up and I heard my best friend who was sitting next to me, and she had a spoonful of scrambled eggs right at my lips. She was like, "You have to eat, eat." The strangest things you remember. But even though I remember very little, I asked questions, and I was a nurse, so I knew. And then as I became more and more lucid and more awake all the time, I got to know the physical therapists who had been coming into my room, even when I was unconscious, right from day one, as soon as they realized, wow, she lived through the night. So they came in and they stretched my body. They did all the kind of stretches that we're going to do here today on me. It's called passive stretching, when someone else stretches you because you can't do it yourself. Because when I woke up, I couldn't move. Nothing. And the way I describe myself, and it's not to be disrespectful to anyone who has a disability, but the only word I can think of to describe myself, my condition when I woke up, is I was a blob. I was just a blob in the bed. I couldn't move. I could talk. Sometimes it came out what I call gobbledygook, made no sense whatsoever. Sometimes real words would come out, but they weren't the word I wanted to say. The brain is really a complex organ. And so the brain, if it's not working correctly, it can't send messages through the neurons to fire the impulses to tell your muscles to move, to do something. So I couldn't move. I wasn't paralyzed, but I couldn't move. It was like I was paralyzed all over because my brain wasn't working. It wasn't telling those neurons to fire, so those muscles wouldn't move. So they came in and moved me. They came in and stretched me when I couldn't do it for myself. Why do you think they did that? What were they trying to do?
Get the blood flowing.
I think I heard it.
Get the blood flowing.
Get the blood flowing, right? Because it's like, oh, she lived. Now we have a big job here because she's not able to move. So we've got to get the blood flowing for her. We've got to begin the healing process. So think about it. The major injury was to my brain. I broke a bunch of bones in my face and my hand and had all kinds of other injuries. I had a contusion on my heart. All of those things were going to heal, right? And they did. But what they recognized was she tumbled violently down the highway. And so every muscle, every tendon, every ligament, all of my soft tissue was tensed up like more than you could imagine, traumatically tensed up, tightened up. So they knew they had to come in and get that blood flowing to start that healing process for me. And eventually, days went by, weeks went by, months went by. Eventually, I could sit up at the side of the bed. I could pick up my head. I could raise the fork to feed myself. Small little wins every day led to where I could eventually get up in the parallel bars. You've seen that, right? In physical therapy, people trying to learn to walk again. That was me. And when they would put me in the wheelchair to take me down to the PT room to get in the parallel bars, I was slouched down in the wheelchair because I couldn't hold my head up. I was getting a little bit of control. My hands, I could start to move some, but my head wouldn't stay up, so it was slumped over. So when they would get me up in the parallel bars, my arms were working, my legs weren't working very well yet. They would put a collar on me to hold my head up, or my head was going to flop. So if they didn't do that, if they didn't start the healing process by getting that blood flow and the nutrients and the oxygen to all my tissues, do you think I ever would have been able to learn to walk and talk and balance and function pretty normally? Again? No way. No way. I give all the glory to God because I do believe that I received a miracle, but when it comes to the providers that took care of me, I give all the glory to those physical therapists who came in and stretched me. Because if they didn't, I'd still be living my life out of a wheelchair, maybe not able to hold my head up. When I finally got as well as I was going to get, well, it's been 14 years of trying to get better and better and better, and every year something else comes at me. That's why I had to have brain surgery 4 years ago. But the doctor, the trauma surgeon who told me I was going to die, I remember his face when he said to me, And this was now when I was out of the hospital and I was in his office, and he said to me, Karen, you are a miracle. And he said, you know, I was trying to prepare you for the worst, but you beat all the odds, and it wasn't science that saved you, because we did nothing. There was nothing we could do. Science said you're going to die in the next minutes or hours, but somehow you made it. But I want you to be prepared for what your life is going to look like now, because it's going to be very, very different. And he was trying very empathetically to prepare me for a new life. But it was so negative. It was, you'll never walk again unassisted. At the time, I was using a walker. I was in a wheelchair part of the time and using a walker part of the time. You're never going to drive a car again. You're never going to work as a nurse again. Certainly not the kind of work you currently do. Never, 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 right? So I know why he did that. He was trying to prepare me. But that just made me a little more determined. And I recognized that once I got out of the hospital and out of rehab, nobody was stretching me now. And I had to do it for myself. And there were days when I didn't feel good, and maybe I was feeling a little bad for myself. The headaches were really enormous, and balance was a terrible issue. So it was hard to have to do the rehab. But I realized that on the days that I might have got lazy and not stretched, I couldn't do it. I mean, so I couldn't get up and walk. I couldn't walk with the walker. I couldn't hold my head up. I had to stretch. So, you know, and then this picture is just to kind of show you I've come a long way. You know, I want to make the point that I would still be living my life in the wheelchair. Then I developed a seizure disorder. Then I developed these really bad tremors, and that's why they did brain surgery on me. I have leads in both sides of my brain, 4 inches deep, wires under my scalp that lead down to a battery pack in my chest that gives an electronic impulse to take the tremors away. So I'm steady as a rock now. My tremors were getting so bad that they had gone into my legs, and I was going to not be able to walk after all the work that I did. So I finally gave in and said, okay, I'll do the brain surgery. Because I was scared to death. The biggest risk of the brain surgery was a cerebral hemorrhage, which is what the whole problem started with in the first place. So they spent over a year telling me, we got to do this surgery to keep you functioning. And I was like, no way, man. I'm not going in there. Then the doctor said to me, the surgeon, he said to me, Karen, what we know for sure is that you will become disabled. You won't be able to walk. I already couldn't type, use a phone, write, because the tremors were so bad. And he is the one who put the Machu Picchu idea in my head. He said, Karen, what's on your bucket list? You want to climb Machu Picchu? I was like, I don't even know where Machu Picchu is. Now I know it's in Peru. But I was like, I don't want to climb a mountain. He goes, whatever it is, what's in your bucket list? I'm trying to tell you I can give you your quality of life back so that you can do anything you want to do. I said, well, I want to lay on a hammock in Fiji. Okay, we'll get you to Fiji, right? Whatever it is. So he inspired me to be able to do something even more. And I'll tell you about what that is when we get to the end of this. The point is, if stretching can have that profound of an effect on me in my situation, would you have ever guessed when you met me this morning that 10 years ago I was still learning to walk? That 4 years ago I had major brain surgery, or that I'm kind of bionic, I call it my bionics. Would you have guessed that 14 years ago I was told that I wasn't going to live? Was anything evident to you? Do you remember me telling you that I stretch every single day, multiple times throughout the day? I'll stretch before I get in the car to drive to Springfield today, because that's a 4-hour drive. I'm going to need to stretch. I'll stretch when I get out of the car, because I know what the benefits are for me. I've lived it, I've felt it, I've had life-changing effects from it. And that's why I preach this stuff to anybody that will listen. Because I know that if I can have, with that bad of a trauma, if I can have that profound effect happen to me from doing this, imagine what it can do for somebody who didn't have a bunch of trauma, who just has aches or pains or maybe doesn't have any problems to prevent injuries. What kind of effect can it have on somebody who starts doing this every day without having to be, you know, jet propelled across the highway to learn to do this stuff? Right? It is profound. That's the only word I can think of to really express it. All right. So when we stretch, it's really important to do it correctly. We want to do it safely. Don't bounce. That's my biggest pet peeve. You don't want to bounce when you stretch. So it shouldn't cause pain, but it will be uncomfortable. You'll feel tension. If you have a tight muscle and you go to stretch it, you're going to feel that tightness. Shouldn't be painful, just tight. Okay? If you get into a stretch where you feel a good, comfortable stretch, then you hold it there for 10 to 15 seconds. And in many cases with some of the larger muscles, about 10 seconds in, you're going to go, oh, it doesn't feel so tight anymore. That's because it released. You'll actually feel it release. When that blood flow comes in, you'll feel that muscle go from like this to, and that's when you realize, oh, it's not so tight anymore. It's not a competition. Everybody's at a different level of flexibility. So if you see somebody that can get farther than you can, don't think you have to try to go farther. Okay? No competition here. We're all at a different level. When you bounce, I see people do it all the time, but when you bounce, you confuse the muscle. So it's like when you think about that open the floodgate that happens when you put tension on, when you stretch that muscle. So you confuse the muscle, because when you bounce, you're going open, close, open, close, open, close. And so what your muscle is going to do is spasm up even more. So you want to make sure you get to where it's a good, comfortable stretch and stay there. We won't do the full 15 seconds per stretch here in the interest of time, because I'm going to run through a bunch of stretches pretty quickly. But when you do them for real, spend that good 10 to 15 seconds per, and you'll feel better. If you find that one particular muscle is just super tight, do it more than once. You know, give it the attention that it needs. If some of these stretches, you know, you feel like you're good and limber and you don't need to keep doing them multiple times that day, then don't do them. All right, I'm going to plant a little seed in your brain, because the biggest obstacle, once you get people to buy into this and do it, the biggest obstacle to sustaining the program is people will just forget to do it. That's why I say do it as a group, because then they'll remember. If you don't, they're just going to forget. And at the end of the day, when they're walking out going, oh man, I'm so stiff. Oh, I should have stretched today, right? They'll forget. So what I try to do is plant little reminders. So the first reminder I'm going to plant for you is I want you to think about a doorway, an ordinary doorway that you walk through every day, preferably multiple times at work, and maybe one at home as well. So a regular single doorway, not a great big double door, okay? Picture in your head that doorway that you walk through multiple times at work, and we're going to come back to that. That'll be a reminder, and so the next time you walk through that doorway at work, you're either going to curse me or thank me, one or the other, because you won't be able to get out of your head. All right, ideally, in the beginning of the day, like at the first morning group, do a little warm-up first, get that blood flowing. That doesn't mean you need to go jog or do jumping jacks. It means just walk briskly back and forth in the room a couple of times, get some blood flowing. Because remember, when you get out of bed in the morning, if you don't do any stretching and you go right to work and jump into your, whatever your activity is that you work with, even if that's just sitting, your body is at its status quo low from sleeping. Because when you sleep, everything slows down. Your respirations, your heart rate, your blood pressure, everything slows down. So when your circulation is slowed down, when you wake up, you want to pump it up again, right? You want to get above that status quo low, get those floodgates open, especially first thing in the morning. So if you can do something to warm up a little bit first, that's going to be beneficial. You don't have to, but it will be beneficial. All right, everybody ready to have some fun? I promise it's not going to hurt you. You're going to enjoy it. Take note. I think I forgot to ask you all this when we came into the room. Shame on me. I'm all over the place today. I apologize. Take note of how you feel right now. Physically, mentally, emotionally. Okay? Temperature-wise. Everything. Take note of how you feel at this moment in time. Now go ahead and stand up, and we're going to go through some stretches and have some fun. Oh, over here.
I'm gonna try to record you, if you don't mind.
No, I don't
Doing
mind.
this part, mine.
I'm all over the place today. It's like my worst presentation ever.
You're good.
All right, so we're going to start. We're going to kind of do a head-to-toe series of stretches. So I like to start with this one that I call the sunshine stretch, because it stretches a lot of muscles at once, and you feel the immediate effect of it. So whenever you're stretching on your feet, you want to have your feet shoulder width apart. You want a good wide base of support so balance doesn't become an issue. And then just hands by your side, stand up nice and straight. And when you stretch, you want to remember to breathe. And don't hold your breath like any other exercise. And you also want to remember to stretch bilaterally. So if your right shoulder's hurting you, don't just stretch it. Stretch the left as well. Okay, hands by your side, and then I want you to very slowly and intentionally start to raise your arms up and out. But I want you to stretch them out like someone's pulling on your arms. Like as far out as they'll go, really intentionally. Anybody remember Stretch Armstrong? The rubber doll that you could stretch his arms. So we want to stretch our arms to where we're like the really, really skinny stretch. And then go as high as you can. If you're able to lock your fingers over your head, go ahead. If not, go as high as you can. And then just reach for the sky. Take a nice deep breath and blow it out. Reach for the sky. And then very slowly again as you come down, I want you to really stretch those arms out. Somebody's pulling on you, like the old torture chamber. And then shake your arms out. Tell me what you feel. Come on, I know you feel something.
I felt some
Don't be
pain in
shy.
my upper back.
You feel okay,
I
well, we can work that out.
Just saying, you're asking.
That means you're tight between your shoulder blades probably, so we're going to be able to work that out. What else did you feel? How do your fingers feel? Tingly? Does your whole arm, both arms, like from the neck down, we stretched everything with the fingers. So we got a bunch of muscle groups, part of the shoulder and neck when we did that. Does it feel a little warmer than it did before you started? So now you're warm and tingly. Who doesn't like to feel warm and tingly? Right? No matter who you are, you associate that with something good. So if you can get warm and tingly like that, we spent about 15 seconds doing that. What do you think that's from? What made you warm and tingly? All together now. Blood flow. At 10, 15 seconds. This is the only thing you can do in the way of exercise that can give you immediate gratification. So if you decide you're going to shed a few pounds and you're going on a diet, or you decide, I'm getting kind of flabby, I'm going to work on the abs, get my six-pack back, or I want to tone up my arms, or whatever it is, can you do any of those things in 15 seconds? You probably can't do any of those things in 15 days. It's going to take you months and months and months of constant work to get the results that you're looking for. Stretch, and when something takes that long to get your result, you typically tend to not stick with it because you get discouraged. Average person, I'm speaking very generally here. So if you can get immediate gratification from some stretching, why not? All right, let's just turn and look over your right shoulder just as far as you can go. Don't overstretch, and then come back neutral. Look over your left shoulder. You'll probably find that one side is much more flexible than the other, and that's perfectly normal, not anything to be worried about. Now kind of tip your ear down toward your shoulder. Don't shrug your shoulder, that's cheating. And then reach up and kind of put a little bit of gentle pressure, because it's kind of hard to stretch our own neck without a little help. So just gentle pressure, then come back to the other side. This is something that you can do when you're seated. If you don't want to do this and have people see you, you can grab the side of the chair that you're on and just pull against it like that. Get a really good stretch, and it also stretches the top of your arm. That works really well. And then just tuck your chin down to your chest, and then reach up and put your hands up top, apply a little bit of pressure. You always want to stretch forward and to the side with your neck. We don't want you to stretch backward with your neck. You don't want to hyperextend it. That's not good for you. Okay, now let's just roll your shoulders forward. Roll forward, great big circles, and let them drop. And then roll backwards. If you're tense between your shoulder blades, you might feel some popping and cracking back there. Happens to me every time I do this. Sometimes people say it feels like marbles rolling around back there. Those marbles that are snap, crackle, popping between your shoulder blades are little bitty muscle spasms that have gotten hard over time because they didn't get completely worked out. So as soon as you do this and they want to move, they're kind of fighting back. And that popping and snapping that you feel is them rolling over the muscle, okay, and pieces of the muscle that are really tight. So that's a really easy way to kind of warm up and get ready to do your stretches. So this one is the little teapot. We've all done the little teapot, hands by your side, and then just bring one arm up and tip over. Put your palm up, and that'll get you a better stretch. And the one thing you want to watch out for with this, you want to have a straight line from your ankle to your knees, to your hips, to your shoulders. Try not to bend forward or arch back. Try to go nice and straight. And go just as far as you can go, and then switch sides. Again, concentrate on making a nice straight line. If you're like me, this side is really hard for me. I can't go, no matter how much I stretch, this is as far as I'm going to go, because I have a really bad hip. So if you've got a really bad hip or a really bad back, the doctor told me, I had some x-rays taken about 8 years ago, and it was a friend of mine who is a doctor, and he said, Karen, let me help you with some of your problems that you got. And he took x-rays of my back, and he went, how old are you? And at the time, I was like, oh, 47-ish. And he said, you have the spine of an 80-year-old. Because I tumbled down the road, the trauma. So my spine is incredibly arthritic. So that's another reason why. If you have arthritis and something doesn't want to move well for you, if you stretch it, be gentle, be kind to your body, but stretch it, force it to keep moving, that's going to be probably better than any pill you're going to be able to take. Fix it. So then in today's electronic world, we do lots of typing, texting, keyboarding, gaming, whatever it is. In your industry, wrenching down on something, screwdrivers, vibratory tools, right? Those things really take their toll on your hands. And whatever takes this toll on your hands, Justin used the example of instead of getting a hammer, using the palm of their hand as a hammer, that can cause a really bad wrist strain. But what it can also do is cause inflammation in the joint. That inflammation in the joint is going to lead to some tendinitis. So a lot of times people have symptoms in their hands or the wrist, and it's actually coming from a nerve impingement in their elbow or a tendinitis in their elbow. And a lot of times they have arm and hand pain, and it's coming from their neck or shoulder. Lots of times we send people to the doctor, work-related injuries, they got to specify what body part is hurt. We're only going to pay for the body part that got hurt. So if their shoulder is hurting, right, they go to the doctor, you authorize them to treat the shoulder, but the doctor comes back and says, problem's in the neck, not the shoulder. I've had so many people that have said to me, yeah, so then the insurance company denied me because it wasn't my shoulder, it was my neck. But I just knew where the pain was. So stretching all of this can prevent a lot of that, right? So hold your arm out in front of you, pull your hands back, pull your fingers back toward you, and you should feel a nice stretch on the underside of your forearm. And then bilateral, we want to show love to both sides, whether both sides bother you or not. We want to be equal. And then the next one is going to be down. So you're going to pull your fingers down gently. And when you do this to your dominant side, you probably feel it more right up in the top of your forearm. Okay, then switch sides. If you're like me, I'm very, very dominantly right-handed, so my left hand, I don't notice it as much. When I do this on the right, I feel real stiff. Something else that's super simple, and these are all the things you can do when you're walking from one place to another throughout the day, right? It's just, and I'm going to hold my hands up high. You don't have to hold your hands up high. I'm just doing this so you can see. It's just tendon glides. You can do this with all your fingers at once. And when you do this, just at the farthest knuckle that you can bend, when you do this, you're gliding the tendon all the way up through the joints. And just doing that can help to keep the tendon healthy and lubricated and mobile. So you might be less likely to get that really bad tendonitis or nerve impingement. Another thing is just squeeze a really, really tight fist. Just squeeze as tight as you can. Go ahead, do that with me. And then spread your fingers out as far as you can spread them. And this one, you don't have to hold it for 10 or 15 seconds, but if you do this a couple of times, repeatedly, a couple of times every hour, whether you're writing, typing, wrenching down, whatever you're doing with your hands, that's going to help to bring blood flow back into your hands. Because look at your fingers, your hands. These are really crowded spaces. There's lots and lots of anatomy, bones, tendons, ligaments, muscle, everything in here. So if you're using your hand constantly, a lot of times people will say, my hand starts to get numb. That's because you don't have blood flow coming in. You're using it so much, you're not giving it a chance. If you've got it flexed all the time, you're not giving the blood a chance to get in. So just stop and shake them out, do this, get that blood flow going back into your hands, start healing those tissues. So now with the shoulders, I know I've been hearing that shoulders, knees, and backs are a big issue within your industry. So one of the easy ways to stretch the shoulders, you just pull an arm across over to the other side, kind of grab your arm at or above the elbow, and you should feel a really good stretch back here. This is getting part of your rotator cuff, not all of it. The rotator cuff is kind of complex, but we'll show you a couple of different ways to do this to get more muscle group. Switch sides. And Justin talked about how shoulders tended to be the most expensive kind of injury to rehab. Why do you think that is? Shoulders require a lot of physical therapy. They take a long time to get well. Whether it's a non-operative or a surgical case, it takes a long time. So if you have shoulder surgery, you can, if one of your employees has shoulder surgery, you can count on them being down for at least 3 to 6 months, probably more like 9 months. And if it's something that you can't accommodate, then you're paying them to be off. You're paying for all that physical therapy, and the cost is skyrocketing that whole time. So up on the right side of the screen, not everybody can do this. You have to be a little bit flexible, but if you're able to, kind of put your elbow behind your head and then just pull a little bit down on that elbow. It's kind of weird to do. You kind of have to be a contortionist. But the reason I show you this is it's a great way to get the other side of the rotator cuff as well as some of the tricep and the upper arm. So now here's another option that you can do if you just can't contort yourself to get into that pose. Take a towel, or like you've got a resistance band that you could use for this as well, but this works good for me to demonstrate. Take a towel, put it behind your back like this, and then walk your hands together just as far as you can go, and then pull against it. I'm pulling my hair. So pull against it, and when you do that, you're actually getting a stretch of both shoulders, and you're getting a little bit of this upper arm as well, so you can kind of get more bang for your buck if you do it that way. I couldn't find a good picture of that, or I would have put it in there. I guess I could have taken a picture. All right, so now this one's going to be really good for those of us that put all our stress in our shoulders and back between our shoulder blades where we get really tense. So just reach behind you, grab your hands behind your back, stand up nice and straight, don't lean forward, and pull those arms up as far as they'll go. Some people will go a lot farther than others. Again, it's not a competition. And now squeeze your shoulder blades together. You want to really, really squeeze. So all those little muscle spasm marbles we talked about between your shoulder blades, when we rolled them, we woke them up. When we rolled our shoulders, now we're squeezing them out, okay? Squeezing lots of blood flow in there, okay? Now, here's where I need a volunteer. Who wants to volunteer to help me? I promise I won't hurt you or embarrass you. Come on.
Come on.
Okay, I was
Come on,
hoping you'd
come on,
volunteer because this one will help your tension. Okay, remember I told you all to think of a doorway that you go through at work every day. Walk up to that doorway, if you would please, face the door. And then I want you to put your, the door frame, right here. And I want you to kind of assume the position, okay? Put your hands on the doorway, and now just lean in to your hands and let your body weight give you a good stretch. Can you feel that back behind your shoulder blades?
Yeah, my arms.
In your arms, yeah. So now she's got her hands a little above shoulder height. Bring your hands down just a little bit more. Do it again. And you can raise and lower your hands to get different muscle groups when you do this. But if you, next time you're walking through that doorway, then you remember that I told you I planted that seed. Just providing nobody's walking right behind you that's going to plow into you. Stop in that doorway and just lean. It felt good, didn't it? Yeah, excellent. Thank you. I appreciate you volunteering, so I'm going to give you a present.
Thank you.
There you go. So that is one way that you can do that. Squeezing, when you do the doorway one, you get a little bit more across your chest. And so you get front and back stretch. And another way that you can do it, now I'm going to get out of Marlon's camera, but oh well. You can go up to any wall, any solid surface, put your hand on it and just turn against it. And you get that same kind of stretch, but you can only do one side at a time when you do it like this. The other thing you can do, I don't really have a good corner in this room, you can go into a corner, kind of assume the position again, and lean in. And you can get the same effect as we saw in the doorway. The doorway just happens to be the easiest way to do it. You don't have to worry, because if you lean into a corner, you might end up with your face in the corner. Doorways are just a simple one. We walk through doorways every day. Stop and stretch as you go through the doorway. And some people are like, I'm going to look like an idiot. People are going to be, what are you doing? I said, well, when they comment on what you're doing, tell them that you're stretching to take away some of the muscle spasm that's developing from the day's tension. And if they were smart, they'd do it too, right? It's contagious. All right, so these are some of the low back stretches that I was talking to you about doing at home before you go to bed. Not going to ask anybody to do this. We'll do a different low back stretch. This one up here on the very top is the easiest one to do, and it will take so much stress away from you. So at night before you go to bed, just lay on the floor on your back and hug your knees up to your chest. I've had some guys who have a little bit of a belly who have said, Karen, I can't possibly do that because I can't get my knees up to my chest. Well, then take a towel and pull your knees up as far as they'll go. And that one's going to give you a major stretch of your low back and hips, a little bit of your arms. The other one that's real easy to do and also covers a lot of muscles, very relaxing. I call it the praying to the gods. You just kind of sit down on your feet, get on your knees, sit on your feet, and walk your hands forward as far as you can go. Let your head relax and just drop down there, and you will find that to be incredibly relaxing. So even if you don't want, if you're not doing it for the benefit of stretching the muscles, this is a great relaxation technique as well. Just take some big deep breaths while you're down there, and it will really help you to calm down, better blood flow, and sleep better. The one on the bottom is a little more difficult, and if you're not real flexible, you won't be able to do that one right away, but you can give it a try. It does require a little bit of arm and shoulder strength because it's kind of sort of like doing a push-up, but you're leaving your hips on the floor. So you lay face down, put your hands next to you as if you were going to do a push-up, but then leave your lower body on the floor and just arch your back up. So when you first do that, if you're not real flexible or strong, you won't be able to fully extend your arm like hers is straight. You might be only able to get up a little ways, but however far you can go, hold it there for as long as you can. Take some nice deep breaths. You get relaxation, strengthening, and stretching out of that particular maneuver. So for the purposes of today and for in the workplace, the best way to do a low back stretch, and I saw some of you do it when you get up today, although you may not have even realized you did it because it is natural. But I want you to put your hands on your hips like so. I don't know if you can all see me, so not like this, but like this. And I want you to really push in with your hands because you're going to use your hands to support your low back and hips. Feet shoulder width apart and just do a back bend. Keep pressing in. You want to support that low back. And again, some people are going to look like Gumby and others are barely going to move. Whatever is your level of flexibility is okay. Don't look up. You want to keep your head straight. Look straight ahead so you don't hyperextend your neck. And when you do this, if you're able to really bend, you'll even get a little bit across the front of your hips. You might feel that. If you're not feeling that yet, just keep doing it. And as you get more flexible and you get some more bend in your hips, you'll feel that. And that feels great. That's one that's worth doing twice because you've been sitting for a while. So go ahead and do that one again. Make sure you use your hands to support you. All right, good. So next comes the hamstrings, but I want to talk to you a little bit about your hamstrings. So remember I told you about how you can have a serious back injury from picking something up that weighs nothing, like a pen or a piece of paper? Well, that's because of hamstrings. So hamstrings support your back. Hamstrings are the largest muscles right back here in the back of your upper legs that connect your hip to your knee, okay? And they give the most support for your back. So we talked about body mechanics. Ideally, we know you bend at the knees, not at the waist. But when you have to bend at the waist, if your hamstrings are tight, which because we're humans and we all walk upright, they're all tight every day. These are the ones we have to give a lot of attention to keep them loose and limber and well circulated. Because whether we're standing or sitting, they will shrink up, okay? Since they support our back, if I drop something down on the floor and I'm going to use human nature to pick it up, which is bending over at the waist, I bend over at the waist and my hamstrings lock up about here because they're short and tight. Am I going to be able to go any farther to pick that pen up? I can still go. I can go all the way to the floor and pick that pen up. But as soon as I get past the point where my hamstrings locked up, all my back muscles are taking all the strain. And generally speaking, unless you've got the six-pack and you're rock hard, which is more the exception than the norm. The average person is going to be weaker through the abdominal muscles and the back muscles here. This is just how we're built. So the average person is going to be weak through this area. And since this is the musculature that supports our back, does it surprise you that we see so many back injuries? Everybody always talks about core strength. If you hurt your back or you go to the gym, core strength is a big deal. Your core is these back muscles, hip, and ab muscles. The reason it's so important is because it supports our back and it will help us to not have a back injury. But it's really hard to get that six-pack and get a really, really strong core. So if you're one of the majority of people who don't have a strong core and you also have tight hamstrings, you're at high risk for a back injury. So one thing you can do that doesn't take months and months of work at the gym to get those rock hard abs, which if you can do it, power to you, go for it. But one thing you can do that is going to have a more immediate effect and lower your risk of back injury is keep those hamstrings stretched really well. There are a lot of different ways to do a hamstring stretch. I'm going to show you the one using the chair. So I want to kind of get where you can all see me. So I'm going to show you this first, then I'll have you do it. I want you to hold on to the chair or the table for balance. You kick your foot up here, stand up nice and straight. If you slouch and bend your back, you lose a lot of the stretch. So I have people put their hands, one palm on top of the other, and put them on your upper leg with your arms straight, and then just start sliding them down your leg. That helps to keep your back straight. And when you get to the point that you can feel a really good stretch back here, you just hold it there. This is one of those big muscles that it's going to feel real tight for a moment, like mine was real tight there, now it's loose, because the floodgates opened and it loosened up. So when you do that, then you can go a little bit farther and hold it there until it loosens up. So go ahead and try that. Be sure and hold on for balance. Be sure and keep your back nice and straight. You're going to have very tight hamstrings. You're all going to feel this.
Oh, hard deal.
Can you feel it? Yeah. Do you have a bad knee?
No,
Oh.
it's just in here.
Yeah. If you have a bad knee, be careful with this if you're being treated for a knee. And now while you're down there, you feeling a pretty good stretch like from the knee to the hip? It usually will wake you up, right? Now reach down and put your toes up toward you. So now you're getting a stretch all the way from your toes to your hips. We added the calf muscle in there. And if you feel that really tight tension, just wait there for a few seconds, and then you'll recognize it's relieved as soon as it loosens up. So make sure you do both sides. This is the one stretch that I tell people if you're not going to do any other stretches. Some people have said, what's the most important stretches? Because I don't want to do all of these. Like, they're all equally important, but if you're only going to do one stretch, I'd say this one is probably the most critical, because those hamstrings are going to be the most tight all of the time, and you got to work at these. So there are lots of different ways to do that. Now you can actually, I got to have something to hold on to because I have balance issues. Scrambled brain, that happens. You can do it standing up without a chair. It's a little bit harder to do. You bend one leg and you come forward on the other heel until you feel that. And you can get a really good stretch. And when you pull your toes up, you get the calf as well. So that's another way to do it. I tell people to use what's in their environment. So those overhead crews that I first taught to do this, and they said, oh, by the time we get out of the truck, you know, hours have passed and none of the effects are going to still be in place. I say, yeah, when you get out of the truck, use the door jamb or the bumper or a tree or a park bench, anything you can, because you've been sitting now for a while, and get those hamstrings stretched, right? Use the side of the truck, the door, shut the door and do one of these. Right? Do both sides of those. You can put your foot on the wall and you can get a hamstring stretch this way. There are so many different ways that you can achieve the stretch by using whatever's in your environment that you might want to use. So the next one, well, here's a way that you can stretch your hamstring at home. By laying on your back, knees bent, just reach up and pull up your leg. Now, this is a picture of a great positioning. Her back is flat on the ground. Her leg is at 90 or more degrees. If you've got really tight hamstrings, you're not going to be able to do that at first. So you might not even be able to reach your leg to pull it back. So you can use the resistance band. You can use a towel or a rope. Anything you got hanging around that you can throw around there and pull your leg back toward you. And I promise you, once you start doing that regularly, then all of a sudden you're going to notice, oh, I don't need to use that towel or rope anymore. I can reach now, and I can get to 90 degrees like her, because you can do it. That's to me the best way to do it. You can get the best stretch this way, but obviously not appropriate for the workplace. So this is a good one to do before you go to bed as well. If you're laying on the floor and you squeeze your knees up to your chest, then you can just do some hamstring stretches while you're at it. And then this is the quadricep stretch. So your quads are a group of 4 long muscles that attach at your hip and your knee. So quads do a lot of the work to support your knee. So if you've ever had a knee problem and had physical therapy, first thing they start talking to you about is strengthening your quads. So before you have that knee injury, if you want to try to keep them healthy, now this is going to be hard for some people to do. If you can do it, reach back, grab your foot. Don't lean forward because you lose stretch. Stand up nice and straight and pull that foot up to your butt. Now if you can't do that, if you have trouble with that, again, use a chair or the wall. Just put your, even if you can only get your foot this high, and you just lean back into it and then lower that leg and you'll get a really good stretch. So a lot of times people are like, I can't, you can use a towel or something, but it's kind of awkward and you'll probably fall over and lose your balance. That's what happened to me. So I would do it on the wall. So make sure you do both sides. Get those quads stretched really good. And has anybody noticed that when you first get into a stretch, it feels really tight, and then it's suddenly not so tight, right? What happened? Why did that happen?
Blood flow.
Blood flow, right? So when you first stretched it, the muscle is tight and short, and it's tensing up and it's fighting you. And then that blood flow comes in, and the muscle gives in and relaxes. That's the goal. So, it's unnatural, even dogs do it, right? You see dogs, cats, every animal will get up and stretch like this, unless they're chasing a squirrel, then they stretch later. So it really is natural, and I saw all of you do it at some point throughout the day-to-day. You did some sort of stretch, whether it was like this, like this, like this, you know, cracking your knuckles kind of thing, or when you stood up and went like that, and you don't even realize you're doing it. So this is just a matter of making it more intentional. All right, we're going to have some fun with these blue resistance bands that you have on your table. So if you would pick those up and tie a knot in each end like I've done on mine, that knot is going to help to keep you from letting loose of it, because what I just did is hand you all a projectile flying weapon. So please don't use it that way. I actually did have a class one time. I always tell people how sometimes when I have a class full of men who are still little boys inside, they immediately pick these up and start snapping them at each other and trying to shoot them like rubber bands. Well, these are rubber bands, and they will fly across the room. And one of them came pretty close to my face one time, and that's when I realized, all right, tie knots in them to hold on really tight, gives you something to hold on to. So when we do the resistance band routine, this is going to stretch and do some gentle strengthening. So it's really good for the upper body to do some gentle strengthening. If you're starting to notice that the underside of your arm is a little less firm than you'd like it to be, these things can work really well. It's a very gentle, easy tool to get some strengthening in your arms. So I'm going to show you just a couple of these because I know shoulders are an issue. So these are a really good way to keep the shoulders well circulated, stretched, and get a little strengthening. They're not heavy strengthening, but it's fun to do this. So when you use your resistance band, if you wrap your hands around it, then you can make it shorter. Obviously, shorter is going to be more resistance. If you want less resistance, don't wrap your hands, just hold the knots, okay? So if you don't wrap your hands at least once, it's going to be next to nothing for you. So usually, with this length, one wrap, hold on tight. So just hold it out in front of you, stretch it out, and then go nice and slow. The idea is pull it out and resist the return so that you're going nice and slow in both directions. You don't want to just snap it back, okay? Then you can hold it up over your head and bring it down behind your head. And just nice and slow out, nice and slow in, okay? Then the other one that I always do, is kind of fun, it's really good for the shoulders, is if you put one hand on your hip, hold on tight to that knot, and then put the other hand straight out in front of that hip. I'm gonna wrap it a little bit more. And then just with the arms straight, all the way out. And remember, hold it firm pressure all the way up and all the way back. And you might kind of feel that will strengthen your shoulder. That's working your rotator cuff. And then do the same thing to the other side. I'm surprised nobody picked up on it. This is the disco move. I always have people, in many classes, I have people that like to do and play with this. But this is just a couple of things you can do with the resistance band. I'm going to show you, that was that one. I'm going to show you a picture here. This is how to do a double arm curl. You can do it at both arms at the same time by having a longer band and stepping on it, and then just curling it up. And if the band's long enough, you really don't feel like it's any kind of work. It doesn't feel like strengthening because it's not hard to do, but that motion is really, really good for you. If you want to get more strengthening, you just shorten the length of the band, okay? So now we can do the same arm curl, but we can do one side at a time. If you sit down, put your feet on the band in the middle, or excuse me, on the end. Wait a minute, I did that backwards. Put both feet in the middle, and then use both hands to come up and curl. This band is not as long as the one she's using, so we can't do this in a standing position, but we can do it sitting. If we want to do a curl in a standing position, we have to step down right next to the knot with the ball of our foot, with all of our weight down on it so that it doesn't snap up in your face, and then you can curl, that's too easy. You can curl up one arm at a time. But unless you have a long band like hers, you can only do one arm at a time. Okay, so I mentioned to you that I ticked off a bucket list item, and I kind of gave you a really sad story when I told you my story, and I don't ever want to leave anybody, like I'm not trying to bring you down, so I want to tell you my story's not over yet, but so far it's going well. So when the surgeon put that idea about Machu Picchu and climbing the mountain, and I thought he was nuts, he inspired me. And so he did give me my quality of life back. So I decided I need to do something with that. I lived for a reason. I don't know what the reason is, but I want to make as much as I can out of the time that I was given. You know, that if you've ever had a near-death experience, it can be a lot of pressure when people keep saying, oh, your purpose in life wasn't fulfilled yet. You still have more work to do in this life. It's like, yeah, well, what? What am I supposed to be doing? You know, then you really struggle with, okay, great, I was given a gift of more time. What am I supposed to be doing? And so I decided to just do everything that I can, treat people as nicely as I can, and try to accomplish as much as I can. I was given the gift of getting my quality of life back once, and then again when it was threatened with the tremors, bless you. And so I decided to do something special with it. Anybody ever hear of Spartan races? Spartan race? If you go to SpartanRace.com, you can get a look at what it is. Anybody ever watch American Ninja Warrior or any of those shows that are on Titans now? Those are like real extreme examples, but it's an obstacle course endurance race. So you run a certain distance, and you endure all kinds of obstacles along the way. So I decided I was going to do that because my son had been doing them for years and is very good at it. It has multiple trifectas, and I used to travel with him to go watch these because they don't do them in Kansas City. That would be too easy. So I would travel all over the country with him to watch him, and I was his biggest cheerleader. And then I was watching one day and I saw people that, you know, didn't look like runners or athletes. They weren't your typical, what you would consider an extreme kind of race runner. Some of them were much older. Some of them were like really heavy set, and you just like, how are they doing that? And I saw all shapes and sizes and ages. They were killing themselves, but they were getting themselves across the finish line. So I decided I can do that too. So So I hired some personal trainers. This is a picture of me afterwards. We went to the local watering hole afterwards. But my story's not over because I got to run the race, and that was right after I crossed the finish line with my son. And when you cross the finish line in a Spartan race, the finish line is a fire pit that you have to jump over. So you better have a little bit of energy left to get over it, or you're going to get burned, literally. I have seen people fall in the fire. It's not pretty. So the reason I tell you that is to inspire you. If I could take the obstacles that were put in front of me